Right, let's jump into this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi guys, and welcome to Piano and Keyboard Artist, where we discuss the artists related to pianos, keyboards, and synthesizers. And continuing with my mini-series, which I'm calling 40 Years of Depeche Mode, this is part 6, and I've got 2 special guests here today. My first guest is a music journalist and a music historian, and he has just recently published this book, which is Depeche Mode FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the World's Finest Synth-Pop Band. He is Mr. Michael Christopher. Michael, hello to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
How's things in, did you say cold Boston or sunny Boston?
It's a bit chilly here today, but there is some sun, so that's good. Yeah, always happy to have a little bit of sun through all this long winter.
That's great. Yeah, we don't see much sun here in the UK. And talking of the UK, my other guest, is a regular face on this channel. He's actually my neighbor based here in Rotherhithe, in the same block, actually. The legend, the guy who's photographed anyone who's everyone, including the first 5 Depeche Mode album covers, Mr. Brian Griffin. Brian, how are you, sir?
Very good, Vaughn.
How's the weather in London, Brian?
Well, you're keeping it off me, actually, because you're above. You keep the rain off me.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the top floor, people.
I'm on the bottom floor, really.
Anyway, Brian, thank you very much for joining us. And I want to say thank you, Michael, rather. Michael, thank you. I obviously learned about you from Brian because Brian actually bought me this book as a Christmas present. And I was very happy to get it. And obviously, me being talking about Depeche Mode a lot on my channel, I don't profess to know it all. In fact, there's a lot I don't know, as my subscribers keep telling me. But this is really an interesting read. And that's what we're really going to talk about today is this book, the inspiration about this book. And we're just going to flow from there. But one of the reasons I brought Brian onto this chat as well today is because Brian actually, if you can just elaborate on this, Michael, I believe Brian was very helpful in helping you get photos or just support with a book. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. We had done an interview, which I had lined up interviews with so many people who were part of the Depeche Mode history. But Brian and I hit it off, and I really wanted to get some of his photos because he was going to be represented so much in the text of the book. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get a couple of his works in there, in addition, of course, to the album covers. And one of the things about writing a book is you don't get a ton of money from the publisher. And I was like, all right, well, Brian's got these iconic photos that are of the band from their early days. And I really wanted to get a lot of that stuff too. And he was very helpful with being able to work with me on providing some of those images, which was, I mean, I cannot thank Brian enough for helping me out so much.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Brian has been very, very gracious with his time. And as I say, from the beginning, I obviously, got him onto the first episode. Fast forward, and this channel is now 2 years old. Brian is a regular face on this channel, and there's no getting away from me because we live in the same building. Okay, so I just want to sort of talk about the book. Obviously, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Be honest with you, I have only read the first chapter. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I think if anyone is a Depeche Mode fan, obviously I've read the first chapter. And the reason I haven't read it yet is only because, Michael, my life's a bit of a shitstorm at the moment, just with so many things to do. And I would really like to read this when I'm on holiday, although I won't wait that long. It's just, this is something I read. It's something that I just really want to sink my teeth into at my own time. But I did read the sort of the foreword and the first chapter. And then, of course, I did flip through just sort of flip through it. And I just want to say to the guys watching here, from what I've seen so far, and also from the people that have read this book so far, It's had fantastic reviews from the Depeche Mode fans, the devotees. And what's fascinating about this book is it's got lots of photos that, you know, all black and white. But I like the way the book's put together. It's very sort of easy. It's easy reading. And, you know, it's one of those books, Michael, when you open it, it kind of draws you in. It's not sort of intimidating. I like the font you've used and just the structure. And, you know, it's all written, from what I can tell, in chronological order. You run through all the albums. But what's fascinating about this book is you can read it cover to cover, and you should, or you can actually just pick it up on a page and you can just read a page. For instance, let's do a demonstration here. I just open it here and it says no disco. And then so he runs through every album in chronological order. And then with every album, he mentions something about each song. And it's really fascinating. Like if we just flip to another page, I Sometimes Wish I Was Dead, which is obviously a song from Speak and Spell. And then it's got some interesting trivia and facts on that song. Puppets, Boys Say Go, No Disco. Flip to another page. Oh, it looks like we're on Black Celebration. There we go. Dressed in Black, New Dress, but Not Tonight. So this is really great for just like quick reference if you want to pick something up and, you know, brush up on your skills. And I've indeed done that. As I say, I've read the first chapter and then I sort of just started flipping through things. And I want to thank you, Michael, because this is going to help me a lot when I continue with my Depeche Mode album review series. So now that I've waffled a lot and I've promoted it, you can send me that tenner later via PayPal.
Yes, yeah.
I want to sort of ask you, what was obviously not what was the inspiration, that's clear, but when did you start? When did you get the idea to start doing this?
Well, the FAQ series from Backbeat Books is a long-running series. I think they might have 40 or 40 something books under that banner. And a lot of it is on music. They have some film in there, and then they have some really weird topics. The FAQ on beer, the FAQ on professional wrestling. So there's all sorts of bizarre things, but they do tend to focus primarily on entertainment. There's one on Prince, there's one on the Beatles. And my agent had come to me and he said, that they were looking at doing one on Depeche Mode, and would you be interested? And of course, I mean, that's why he knew to come right to me and say they're looking at doing one. Just throw together a proposal, which is standard with any book that you're going to have published. I put together the outline, the proposal, and it was a fairly involved process. This was, I think, in late 2016 that this started. Okay. And once it went through, he said they're very interested. They love the samples that you provided, the sample chapter, the sample writings, the outlines, and they want to move forward. I started working on it in 2017 and went through for the next 2 years working on it, gathering up the interviews, of course, doing a ton of research. And then there's the painful process of doing all the stuff of getting the bibliography down and the boring things. And then obviously it came out at the end of 2020, which is really an exciting thing for me. So it's
really a 4-year process.
Yeah, I think from beginning to end, it's probably more like 3 years, but books they're not a quick hit thing. They're not something you just throw together in a few months and then get it out there. You do see those books out there a lot. Let's say there's a big news story or somebody's breaking big. You'll see those quick hit books where they just come out within 3 or 4 weeks after the news cycle, and they're never any good. It's always full of errors, and they're just, they're thrown together.
I think it's very difficult, Michael, especially, and we'll talk about this later, about criticisms and trolls and things like that, which is a real part of the world at the moment, unfortunately. But I think there is that stressful moment, that stressful thing. I suppose me as a YouTuber, I put content out all the time, and there is a responsibility to kind of fact check everything you're doing. However, I think if it's if you look at the nature of YouTube, I can put a video out and I can make a mistake. I'll be corrected and then it's gone. I bring out the next one. With something like this, because it's sort of set in stone, so to speak, there is this pressure on you to kind of get things right. And of course, if you make something wrong, there are those people who are always prepared to, have a go at you. But before we get into that, I just want to bring Brian into this. Tell us, Michael, how did you, obviously you knew who Brian Griffin was. How did you reach out to him and how did that start?
I think I initially reached out via his website, and I said I was working on a starting work on a Depeche Mode project, and would you be able to just have a quick chat and let's just see if we could talk about some things in the photography you've done. And when we first linked up, we got on well, and the conversations went on way longer than I thought it would. And as you said, Brian is so gracious with his time and gave me such an insight into the band of their earliest times, which is what you really want to get. You want to find out what the band was like in the early days. You know, how were they responding? What was it like being around them? And what was it like coming up with the ideas was even more important to me for those photographs. I mean, those legendary album covers, like how did you do that? And hearing the stories were just fascinating to me. And speaking of criticism, it was really interesting to hear Brian talk about the criticism he received around Speak and Spell when it came out. And today, he almost looks like a prophet with how it's, you know, it's save the whales and save everything, save all the wildlife, and that looks like a statement on that. And so many people have gravitated towards that image. It's really interesting how things change over the years. But I learned all of this from Brian, and it was such a fascinating time and conversations with him.
Well, he is actually known as Professor Griffin, but we can now upgrade it to Prophet Griffin. So, Prophet Griffin, how would you like to respond to that?
Well, I think I'm really lucky, Vaughn. I mean, as Michael said, you know, it's a long time since Speak and Spell, and you never know what's going to happen in the world, really. In fact, I mean, when I shot Speak and Spell, it was totally irrelevant, really, wasn't it? Swan in a plastic bag. But now it's incredibly relevant. In fact, it's really interesting because there was a woman who owns, there's a woman who actually runs a very, very big art gallery near London. And she really wants an exhibition of some Depeche Mode photographs. And when we out of this lockdown, out of this problem we're living with, and she really wants Speak and Spell. And I didn't think about the wildlife, about birds, about how plastic is affecting them, well, horribly, in fact. And she looked at that and she thought, wow, it's great. I want a really big image of that in the show, And yet she wants a really big image of it in the show. Yet in 1980, whatever, when I did Speak and Spell, they didn't want it anywhere to be seen, really. I basically sort of just let it just run over the top of me because I had a lot of people objecting to the stuff I did. And I had a lot of problems with the covers I did at that time. So I just thought it's another problem, you know what I mean? Just another professional problem. So yeah, it was irrelevant then, but it's terribly relevant today.
Thank you, Brian. No, Michael, it's I understand how you feel, because when I obviously first met Brian, obviously he was, he lived in the building when I first moved in here. And, I got wind of who he was, and I was always a bit nervous to approach him. And, fast forward now, we're just like two peas in a pod having a drink in the pub. But Brian is very, very gracious with his time and very, very unpretentious. I've often said this to people. I've been at galleries with Brian where people come in and some of them are so flamboyant and, oh yeah, darling. And Brian is the most down-to-earth guy in the gallery. And you wouldn't think he was the artist, because this is what I always say this: the people who genuinely do things are usually the least pretentious. And this is what I love about Brian. But now, talking about reaching out to people, Michael, you did say in your book here, and I did have a big smile when I read this, and I'm going to tell this to him when I see him again. You did say that you reached out to Gareth Jones. And it's quite funny because Gareth Jones said to you, Michael, I've said everything I'm ever going to say about Depeche Mode. And the funny thing, the reason I laughed when I heard that was because when I reached out to Gareth Jones probably about 18 months ago to interviewing for my album review series, that's exactly what he said. He emailed me right back and he said, Vaughn, I wish you all the best, but I've said everything I'm going to say about Depeche Mode. Of course, I did manage to interview him later, and we've now released his vinyl on my label. Which is, which I'm not bragging about. It's just the way it transpired, and there's a background to that. But I'm actually going to shove this in his face for you, Michael. And I'm hoping that we will start a relationship here, and I can get you on a future chat, and I will get Gareth on one of these chats, and we'll make him eat those words. How's that?
That'd be great. Yeah, it's interesting. You reach out to some people, and I obviously reached out to quite a few people in the process of writing this book, and some people politely decline, and some people are more than willing to talk about whatever relation they had to Depeche Mode over the years. But his, I thought, was such. He's had such a role in their history, and he was so kind about it, but also funny about it, that I had to include that in there. And if you think about some of the things you read from people, they say the same stuff over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, you're not going to glean too much new information from certain people. Now, certainly, Gareth, I know I could learn a ton from him if I just could pin him down for a couple of days and, make sure that I force him to tell me the truth. But, that's why a lot of artists and people in heavy media professions, they don't like doing the same interviews over and over and over again. And they, especially if there's a new album out, it's just, well, how did you write this song? It's like, well, why don't I go ask the 30 people that I told that to already? And there's sometimes you feel like you can't give anything new. So why do you want to talk about it? And that's completely understandable.
I think also that's very true. And it really depends on who you interview. But in the case of Brian Griffin, I've actually found that a lot of the questions I've asked him, because Brian is on the channel so often, I will inevitably ask him the same question that I've asked him again. And the interesting thing is he always answers it, whereas there are certain elements in the answer that are the same. There's always an elaboration and a new insight and a new depth that he brings to it. And this is what's so interesting about Brian. Anything you care to say about that, Prophet Griffin?
Yes, I'm fairly interesting, No, I don't know. I'm just very polite. I think I'm really polite man, actually. I'm not rude at all. If it's the last thing I want to do is talk about a certain subject, I'll still talk about it because I'm that sort of guy, really.
Also, I just want to sort of, it's funny, as I sort of looked down, I kind of just opened it on a random page here, and I happened to open it up on Only When I Lose Myself, which was the music video which Brian did for them. We're not going to go into too much detail because Brian and I are going to do a special on that at some point. So why are you talking about it then, Vaughn? Okay, let's cut to that. So let's just coming back to the book. Michael, what sort of specific things, or you don't have to be you can be as general as you want to, did Brian help you with in the book? So not only obviously his experience with the band, but photos and what else?
Yeah, well, what was really important to me is if you look at the way music comes out now, nobody really pays attention to the artwork. It's this little tiny digital file that you see, whether you're on Spotify or iTunes, whatever it is. And even as early as the very early 90s, late 80s, everything was shrunk down to CD size. And it's not to say that there haven't been some great album covers, because there absolutely have. But Brian's with Depeche Mode come from an era where you would take the album home, put it on the player, and just stare at that cover for hours and flip the record over, stare at it some more, start it again. And then, of course, whatever pictures were inside, you would pore over all that information. So this is a time when I really wanted to focus on those images. Of course, we can talk about the Rose on Violator and how that was done, but I want to see, well, what was it like with Some Great Reward? How did that come about? You went to the Alps, and who was it that you brought with you, and how did you get this shot and that shot? And hearing the stories behind album covers that people have poured over again and again, myself included, I thought that would make for something really interesting. And Brian had some great anecdotes about each of those album covers.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there. And this is not me being an arsehole, but it's just you said Some Great Reward, and then you mentioned the Alps.
Oh, Construction Time again.
I know that because you were just flowing, but someone's going to jump in and say, no,
oh yeah,
get your facts right, fact check.
Exactly, yeah.
The problem, the position you are in, you and I are in, mate. We just can't make a mistake, even if it's going.
The smallest thing would just get magnified, and then it destroys any credibility in some people's eyes. Those people, of course, they never make mistakes, so more power to them. But yeah, obviously Construction Time again.
and you know, I've done this album review series with Brian, and you know, in my early days, I thought, okay, well, what are we going to talk about once we've covered all the Brian Griffin albums? Well, I tell you what, you just need to talk to Brian a second time, and you will, as Martin Gore said, when you think you've tried every road, every avenue, take one more look at what you found old, and in it you'll find something new. And that's exactly the case with Brian. But I think if I can just elaborate on what you said there, Michael, is basically it was definitely a time, you know, I when I was talking to Gareth the other day, he thought I was a pervert because I said I used to take the vinyls and sniff them. You know, you smell the vinyl. You know, it's such a hands-on experience. And then you look at it and you read the sleeves, and it's when you're putting a vinyl on, you're making a commitment to listen to that whole body of work. You know, it's not flip, 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 and it's sort of more conducive or in line with the times when you feel people had less short concentration spans and there was more time to focus on things. But part of this this love of the artwork, and indeed you say there's just no attention, or people just don't care about the artwork these days. But what's fascinating about those days is what record company in current days now, I don't care, even if you're a platinum selling, even if it's Lady Gaga, and you say, I want a man on a mountain swinging a hammer in the Alps, they'll be like, okay, that's fine. We can get it done this afternoon. Go over, we'll get a green screen, a photographer, it'll be done. But if she goes, no, I want the real thing, they'll be like, you can't have it. And this is what I keep emphasizing to Brian and to everyone, and just say, that was a magical time, man. That is never going to happen again. You know, that was a moment, and you were there, man. And this is why I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough of the the stories of this, and even if Brian's told me the story a million times, I want to hear it again and again and again.
Yeah, to hear someone say, oh yeah, we just got some guy from some modeling agency, and we gave him a hammer, and the hammer was actually one of those prop hammers, and then we threw him in front of a green screen. That's not a good story. You know, that's something I could do at home. I don't want to do that. You know, I want to hear how he made this trek, and how he was at the railway station, and how they did all these different images. And yeah, it's more magical, like you said.
And just sort of jumping in on that story, you know, it wasn't, you know, the man on the mountain, as we call him, he was a soldier, and he was Brian's assistant's brother. And he'd just come back from the Falklands War. And there's also the story, and Brian can elaborate, jump in here, when they got to the airport and this hammer. You know, this is what I love about Brian. It's the attention to detail. Whereas most people would think, okay, we'll go out there and we'll just get a hammer. But Brian was like, no, we have to take our own authentic hammer with us. In it, Brian.
Very true, very true. A hammer from Rotherhithe. And it wasn't actually, I mean, I'm talking about something I've talked about 100 times, but I'm not bored about talking about it. It's the fact is, it was just in a black bin liner. It wasn't actually in its case, or inside a case, or inside a special case. It was inside a bin liner. So when it came came down into the luggage area of the airport, I mean, it had nothing to protect the sound it would make when it hit the carousel, you know, and it really hit that carousel. And if you saw the faces of those policemen, 3 of them there were, right? You know how they are. They think they're so officious. They sort of act all sort of like important. And they were right there. And immediately they heard the hammer hit the carousel. They were over. You know, we went, oh no. You know what I mean? But still, it's only a hammer, a sledgehammer.
Well, it's good that that hammer wasn't taken along to Berlin during those turbulent times. Can you imagine?
Oh, I went to Berlin. Yeah.
But not with a hammer.
No, what did I go with? No, I didn't go with a hammer, actually. I smoked in those days. I then went 20 fags, I think I went with. Yeah. I didn't take a hammer there. I'd still take props with me. I still go on jobs and I have a whole set of props that I can employ, you know? But then, I mean, that hammer, honestly, Michael, I mean, that hammer and going up that mountain, that was quite an experience. I mean, Vaughn's heard this before, but I think, although in A Broken Frame, Michael, though that photograph is regarded as being, well, special, the front cover that is, I think Construction Time, again, I got the best body of materials. I really, really like everything I did with that hammer up that mountain, with that hammer from Rotherhithe, where me and Vaughn are sitting now with no hammer.
Yes, just actually, Michael, you're obviously a member of the and let's give a good shout out to my good friend and wingman Rob Rom from Depeche Mode Global Facebook group. I obviously, this just shows how small the world was. I got this for Christmas. Thank you very much, Brian. And the reason I'm reading it so slowly is because it's something you know, when you get older, your time isn't your own. And it's just, as I said, I want some precious time to really savor this. But as I'm saying,
your girlfriend that gets in the way, Sean.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll tell her to go. I'll tell her to go away. But as I've said, this is definitely a book you can sometimes. And as I said, I've read the first chapter, but you can just pick it up and you can go, oh, that's it. And you can just pick it up on. And I like books like that because it's not something you need to read. You can kind of absorb it at your own pace. So I just want to say, Michael, what was the sort of? Obviously, this is being published. How much sort of freedom did you have to write exactly what you wanted so far as the outline, the structure goes? I mean, for instance, you've obviously written it in chronological order, which makes sense. But is this something that, how much freedom did you have, basically?
I had pretty complete freedom in writing the book and structuring it the way that I wanted to. Although I wanted to follow in line with the rest of the FAQ series, where you do have that ability to just pick it up anywhere and just sort of just read wherever you are. You don't have to do it cover to cover, which, as I think you alluded to earlier, it can be quite daunting if you pick up a book and it's, okay, I'll have to start this some other day.
Yeah.
But this is something you can pick up, put down. You can go back and use it as a reference material. But I did want to be able to do it, especially for the newer fans, to do it chronologically. So you're not talking about Violator and then all of a sudden you go back to Black Celebration and then you jump ahead to Ultra and you're just kind of all over the place. So I wanted them to be able to say, okay, here's what comes next. Here's what comes next. So the way I wanted to structure it was tell a little bit of history about the band in the beginning, really get into the meat of each album, and then toward the end, then talk more about the legacy of the band, talk to some fans and see what their experiences were. That was one of the big parts of the book too, which a lot of the FAQ series hasn't done, which is talk to the fans of the band. With Depeche Mode, you have these fans who are so dedicated, more than so many other bands out there. This isn't some fly-by-night band where it's oh yeah, I really like a couple songs by them. It's like, no, we like every song, every B-side, every remix of it, and we'll also complain about this remix and we'll complain about this version, and we like the live version from this city but not from that city. And it's I wanted to get into the fans' heads and find out, well, why is this band so important, and why am I writing about this band? Am I crazy, or do I have friends in this craziness? And I was able to do that with the book. So you'll see as you go on that I talk to quite a few of the devotees.
That's right, the devotees. And I've always said, Michael, I always say Depeche Mode are not a band, they're an institution. I've in this series, as I say, I'm doing my album review series on this channel, but I'm also doing this little mini series I'm doing is called 40 Years of Depeche Mode. And in that, I've obviously I've had Brian on, I've had Gareth, I've got you, and I did a chat the other day with Rob Rom and some other, sort of hardcore Depeche Mode members. I also did an episode where I did a discussion with the younger fans, the sort of the youngest ones were 15 and the eldest being 26, because I wanted to gauge their feelings, because usually older people have a certain bias towards certain albums. And I was interested to find that the younger fans agree with the older fans, that they'll say, look, the best albums are sort of like, from Black Celebration up to Ultra. That's kind of where most people agree. But also what I find fascinating about this band is, and we've got all the data in my group, is I've never known a band that's fans are so agreeable on certain things, but so disagreeable on other things, but still united in the same way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I think if maybe you're talking about, well, I don't know, I can't read your mind, but maybe you're talking about certain albums that are better received than other ones.
Yes,
I know,
yes.
For instance, for me, I really love Exciter. And Exciter is a record that it's personal to me for a number of reasons, but a lot of fans weren't as into it. They didn't like how quiet some elements were, and they didn't think it was the great way to start a new decade. And I just love that record, and that, and I think Ultra are my two favorites, which are so different. Those records are so completely different from one another. But you have some fans with some really strong opinions about an album like Exciter. Or even as recent as Spirit. Some people don't want as much politics as were perceived on that record. But again, at the end of the day, we're giving as much time to sit down and talk with you, or to get onto Facebook groups, because we love this band. There's something about this band that draws us in, despite all of our differences about the material over the years.
Unanimous. So we want to talk about books. Obviously, Michael, I see you're obviously a music journalist and a music historian, but it says here you're a senior writer for the online music magazine of Vanyaland. Is that right?
Yes.
And as I say, your full biography is in the back here. And to you guys watching this, all the information regarding Michael Christopher, his book, and all the other related elements will be in the description below, so you can check it out. I will make sure that no one goes away from my videos not learning and finding full access to the person that I'm interviewing, if that makes sense. But now, talking about books, how many books have you actually published? And then I want to come on to Brian for this, because Brian's obviously a real sort of expert and veteran as far as books go. How many books have you actually published, Michael?
This is actually the first one.
First one, okay.
Yeah, the Depeche Mode is the first one, and I'm waist deep in my second one right now, which is scheduled to come out later this year.
Okay, okay. And we'll get into this and a few other questions, because I want to bring Brian in on this. But how has when was this actually released? Like,
within the past 2 weeks. It was December 28th is when it came out.
So I was one of the very first to get this. So I'm very flattered about that. So how has it been received so far?
The reception's been great. I've been getting good reviews online, and there's been so many people being in the group and being active in Rob's group and a couple other groups. I've encouraged people that if they have any questions about anything, or they just want to talk about the book in general, to feel free to reach out to me. And the response has been really, really positive. People want to engage about this that was written, or that was written, or they just want to talk about how they learned something new in the book, and either thank me for it or just learn more about what they just read.
Right, and here's my word to you guys here in the Vaughn George Facebook group and the YouTube channel. If you're a Depeche Mode fan, you're really, really going to enjoy this. It's really, from what I've read so far, I'm really enjoying it. And don't take my word for it. I've heard great things from it from fellow members and other communities. So let's talk about books now. Obviously, Brian, you're no sort of novice to the books. How many books have you released up until now?
20, I think.
20.
I think I know someone said 20. I mean, I can't believe it myself, but it's up there, between 15 and 20, I would think.
Okay, so many that you can't even remember.
I can't remember it. I'm quite
Okay,
a lot of people with far more photographic books than I've done. I'm just quite well. I don't know. I'm sort of average to low average, really.
Okay, so and this might be a silly question, but I'm going to ask anyway. So what sort of advice do you have to Michael, and what can he expect after his first book? What happens now?
Well, people seem to enjoy reading a book by someone who is not a writer, someone who can't speak English. No, seriously. I don't know how I've survived, really, with my books. My photography pulls me through, I think, because I'm up to my neck, aren't I, in doing a book, as you know.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what did you say, Michael? You were up, where were you in your next book, did you say?
I said waist deep.
Oh, well, I'm drowning in my book. No, seriously, my book gets finished this week, goes to the printers next week, and then it's launched in March, late February, March. It's a book about my biography. It's a book about my middle years, really. In fact, the Depeche Mode years as well. It's 1969 to 1990. So it's the middle years of my career, art college, and then the first 20 years of being a photographer. All my experiences, which I won't mention on this channel. You'll have to read the book. It's quite something. It's very real. Like Vaughn. Vaughn's really good, actually. He says good things about me. He says I'm very honest, I'm very straightforward, I'm very down to earth. I'm too honest, too straightforward, and too down to earth when it comes to writing a book. Okay. So you can just imagine what this book might entail, because it was in that period where, can we say, it was really rock and roll. Yeah. And I was embraced in that world, really. I became, well, next to a few very, very famous bands, and I tell the stories about them in the book. And I tell the stories generally about my life as a photographer. So if you're interested in what it was like to be a photographer in the 70s and the 80s, then this is the book for you. Brian Griffin, Black Country Dada.
And I just want to actually say, and then we're going to get onto your back onto your book again, Michael. I've said this to Brian before, I think, because Brian and I've started a Depeche Mode poster prints business. Obviously, it's a long story. I don't want to get into it. Everyone watching, I was going, oh no, Vaughn, don't talk about that again. We all know about that. Yes, I know you do. But what's interesting about I said this to Brian, I must have said this about a year ago or something. We're talking about this. I said, Brian, have you ever considered releasing a book on Depeche Mode photography? You know, because there's so much you can talk about, but just like a big book on just Depeche Mode and just the photography. And funny enough, one of my Facebook group members, shout out to Sebastian Barbie, he actually said the same thing the other day. And he said, you know, Brian should release something like this. We'll crowdfund it. So I went back to Brian and I said, Brian, you know, that's a good idea. Not now, obviously, but is that something, and I'm putting you on the spot, is that something you may consider doing in the future?
Of course.
Okay, that was an easy one.
Of course. I mean, I'm going to do a few books in the future.
Okay. Well,
so don't forget, I said the book that I've just done is 1969 to 1990. And so therefore it's still a lot of years since 1990 to the present day, and even in the future. So there's lots of stuff happened over the last 20 years to me, lots of incredible things. So I've got another book in me just on pure basis of writing about my life, apart from my photography.
Okay, to the guys watching here, I think that is something you can comment in the description below. And here's a question to you. Would you be interested in a Brian Griffin book focused particularly on Depeche Mode? Everything Brian knows about Depeche Mode, all his time, a big, beautiful picture book, crowdfunded. Are you interested? Would you get behind it? Comments in the description below. Yeah, I'm surprised how easy he gave in, Brian.
Now, I know that I'd be interested in something like that. I mean, for the sheer amount of outtakes that you would just seeing things from different angles, That to me is fascinating. Because you're so used to one picture for so long. And I mean, going back to Construction Time again, there is, some of those images and even sketches of them, not done by Brian, but sketches from other people were used for the singles on the record as well. But to just be able to see how many different shots of being on the mountain, that to me you're so used to one image. So to see it from a different viewpoint is fascinating.
This is what Brian really opened Pandora's box, because as you say, Michael, we've got those images so embedded into our psyches. And then when Brian and I started working together, he started showing me pictures that I'd never seen before, pictures the community I've never seen before. And he keeps doing that. Every now and then he'd be like, Vaughn, have you seen this one? I'm like, no, Brian, no one's ever seen that one. Give it to me. And people are like, how much more has he got? But this is the thing with Brian. He's kind of like a bottomless well. He just keeps giving. But anyway, that's enough flattery, Brian. You can send me the tenner now.
That's too much.
That's too much. I'll settle for a $5. How's that? Michael, I want to turn the conversation a little bit more serious now. And obviously, keeping with the channel, we always want to keep things positive. But we live in this world which is not always positive and smoke and, and Mary Poppins and blah, blah, blah. You did put out a post the other day where you were, I don't want to say venting, but it's something that resonated with me, because I think with myself, you sort of never want to sort of show, not show weakness, but you don't want to sort of show that things have riled you or something. Sure. But if you just want to sort of talk about how you've obviously received a bit of criticism or a bit of trolling recently regarding this book.
I think you're going to get that with anytime you do. I've been writing articles for decades now, and people just, whether they disagree with you or sometimes they just don't like the artist you're writing about, they find some way to troll you. And it's such a minority out there of people. I really want to stress that, and especially within the Depeche Mode community, which is such an amazing community. However, there are still some people out there that I don't let these things rattle me. I don't let things get to me. But someone had gone into my personal Facebook and started messaging members of my family and members of my friends and saying, how can you support him writing this book? How can you, there's lies. It's all lies in this book, and return this book. And I'm like, I had family members message me. I wasn't even aware this was happening. And they said, look at this message I got. And then it started snowballing. So of course I had to block the person, and I just wrote that in the group, because it was someone from the group. It was a new member, but it was still someone from the group. You don't know what their agenda is. You don't know where they're coming from. But what was fascinating to me is the things that they were going on about. And I did have another criticism about this too, were things that were just different than what they knew. And they said, for instance, if it was somebody singing a certain song or a line in a certain song, they would say, well, I never heard that before. Why didn't you ask more questions about it and follow up more about it? Because there's hundreds of things I talk about in this book. I couldn't drill down into every single one and go back and say, well, wait a second, you said this, Vince. Was this true about that song? Let me just find this out. And you can't do that, unfortunately. But some people take that really, really personally. They know every little tiny thing. And if you go against what they've known for so many years, then you must be wrong. And I've had one person, thankfully it's the only one so far, but I had one leave a 1-star review because they didn't agree with certain things in the book. And then of course we mentioned this a few moments ago, that if you make one mistake, it gets completely magnified. And somebody wrote, Michael doesn't even know Depeche Mode. He thinks that 101 was filmed in black and white. And I thought, 101's not in black. What does that even mean? 101's not in black and white. And the person said, yes, in the book he says that 101 is in black and white. Now I'm furiously flipping through the book. I'm like, where did I write about 101 being in black and white? Well, it turned out that, and the book goes through so many editing phases, and you're going to miss something, and of course somebody is going to point it out. So what had happened when I was talking about the filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker, who has done so many amazing documentaries over the years, including 101, of course. right before I'm talking about 101, I'm talking about the Bob Dylan film No Looking Back that he did in 1967. And what I wrote was, D.A. Pennybacker did No Looking Back, which was filmed in black and white. And then it was supposed to be a hard stop. And then it says, and doing Depeche Mode's 101. Well, I must have left out a comma or a period or whatever. And the editor just ended it at the No Looking Back and then put filmed in black and white, 101. Yeah. And I saw it and I thought, how did I miss this? Because that's something an editor, unless they're innately familiar with Depeche Mode, isn't going to recognize. They're not going to know about 101. They're looking for your P's, your Q's, the periods. They don't know about the band and who did what within the band. So when I saw that, I thought, ugh, and I had to go furiously check back in my drafts. And so that's what it was. It was a copy editing error that now is this huge thing that I think 101 is in black and white.
You know, Michael, it's very difficult because, you know, I get lots of, I've got a wonderful community. I get lots of love sent to me every day, but it's always sometimes that one shitty comment that really riles you, kind of thing. And we shouldn't give it the attention. But, you know, as you say, it's few and far between. And as I wrote on your post there once, it's very true. You will never be criticized by someone who has done more than you. You will only be criticized by someone who's done less than you. So as you say, you don't know what people's agendas are, but, you know, I've even had people who are like, been subscribers of mine since the early days, or like diehard fans. You know, I don't want to say diehard fans, but I don't want to say they're my fans, but they're like really into what I'm doing. And then they've been with me since the beginning. And then I release a video and I say something and they get so angry, you know, that it almost nullifies all the good that they've seen me, and they unsubscribe, but they let me know I'm going. And you know,
you see that a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian, are you going?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just want to say thank you, because obviously Brian's obviously very busy working on that new book. So thank you for joining us, Brian.
Pleasure. I wanted to see Michael, you know, and say hello, and I wish him every success with his book. I feel a small part of it, so it gives me a great pleasure to see him on this program, you know, to help him sell more copies.
Well, I'm sure the three of us will meet up again, if not in person, maybe on an online chat of some sort. Brian, thank you so much for your time, my friend, and I'll see you again.
As always. Lots of love, Michael.
Thank you, Brian. See you soon.
Take good care, man.
Bye, Brian.
Bye-bye.
Okay. But yeah, I think, Vaughn, that it is, as much as we tend to give, and we try not to in our headspace, of either trolls or critics or people that kind of make us less for doing something that we are so invested in. And I know how invested you are in the channel. And, you know, of course, when I see somebody say, oh, he did no research on this book, you sit there and think, if they only knew how many friends I pissed off by saying, sorry, can't go to the pub with you tonight, or can't go to this show because I've got to stay in and work on this, and I need to research this, and I need to go back and look at these interviews and go over all these multitudes of things you do in a book. It does hit you. But then, and again, especially in a community like Depeche Mode, there is so much love to a song. There's so much love out there from the fans, just in general. I know that when I first was writing the book and looking for some people to contribute their memories of the band, and whether it was live or whether it was how they got them through a particularly tough time in their life, the outpouring was so immense. And with each outpouring came, I'm so happy that you're doing this book, and congratulations on doing this book. So there's the love way outweighs any trolling or any hate that you get for it. And you're going to have the people that you mentioned that get a little obsessive and they say, okay, well, fine, I'm leaving your group then. Well, it's like, I'm sorry that this wasn't for you at the end of the day.
You know, just to actually point out the extreme mentality of some fans, and the best way I can demonstrate it. Are you a Gary Newman fan?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh yes, of course. And I was just on the foreword in this the introduction. No, was it the introduction or the foreword is your friend Matthew Coors.
Oh yes, from Not a Surf.
Yeah, right. And he talks about he talks about how when he heard the Icy Cool Cars, he talks about Jean-Michel Jarre. So anyway, we're all on the same page here. But what I was trying to say was, talking about extreme fans, Gary Newman is one of the guys who has probably some of the most extreme fans you've ever come across. And I'm one of them, but I'm not that extreme. But the funny thing was, I remember Gary Newman talking on an interview once, and he did, I mean, he's done so many songs, obviously, because he's been around for so long. And he did the song called Joe the Waiter. I think it's cute. It's not one of my favorites. God help me for saying that. But he was actually saying on an interview once, he said, someone was saying, oh, you need to do Joe the Waiter. And he was like, oh, God, I don't want to do Joe the Waiter. And then someone followed up to this interview and they had a go at him for saying, don't slag off Joe the Waiter. Fuck you. It's a great song. And he's the artist.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell you how many artists I've interviewed over the years. And I'll just bring up what are you tired of playing? What do you not want to do live anymore? And it's sometimes just for my own information. And if some of the fans knew some of the songs that people don't want to play, or they're like, no, I don't really like that song, they would go mental over it. They would lose their minds.
I think it's almost like if the Rolling Stones turn around and say they don't want to sing Brown Sugar or My Satisfaction. I mean, there were some fans that would be just generally mortified by that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I've seen the Stones a couple times, and I think in more recent years, they've just said, oh, we could give a damn what people want, because some nights you don't get every hit that you want from the Stones. They'll dig a little deeper into their catalog. And I think if you're a really hardcore fan, you want that, instead of getting Start Me Up, you instead get something else like Sweet Black Angel. I want that.
Michael, let's just talking about taste now. We talked about how the community is so passionate about the band, how people are so unanimous on certain subjects, but so divided on other subjects. I find that there are certain things where everyone's very unanimous. It's like when you talk about Shake the Disease or Stripped or Never Let Me Down Again, there are those songs that everyone's like, yes. But when we come to albums, I think this is a subject that really divides the community. And what you said now is very, very fascinating. I, over the years, have learned to, I'm finding something in Exciter that I never found before. I actually am, it's grown on me. I never saw it as a bad album, but it's definitely gone up in my estimations. But you actually said that Exciter and Ultra are two of your favorite albums?
Yes. And I like some of the deeper tracks too on there, on each record. And I like the fact that they're so different, that if somebody said, well, what would represent Depeche Mode? I think you pull something from the early days, maybe something even with a little bit of an industrial bent. And then most people know Violator, but if they're like, well, what would I get into after Violator? I think I would say, check out how different these two records are. Ultra is so much more in your face and a bit abrasive at times. Whereas Exciter, it is more of a grower when it comes to an album. It's not something you say, oh, let's throw this on and we'll get the party going. I mean, it doesn't really happen with Exciter. Exciter is something where you talked about with vinyl, where you're committing to listening to something. That's a record you want to put on and you want to sit and give your full attention to. Put the headphones on and really dig into that record.
No, that's fascinating. And I like what you've done there is, I always say to people is, you should always have an opinion on something. Don't necessarily try and force it down someone's throat.
Yeah.
But I like what you did there is you explained perfectly why it was that you liked it. You have your reasons for doing that. And Exciter is one of those, I think it's probably the album that is the most sort of like, people are, no one's really lukewarm about it. People are usually like, they don't like it or they love it. And for you to say it's one of your favorites.
Yeah. Yeah. And but when you talk about Depeche Mode, and if you're such a fan, it almost becomes a mood thing. Yeah. It's like, well, what are you in the mood for? It's like, well, I'm really in a music for the masses mood today. Okay. Yeah. And you're not really going to go wrong with Depeche Mode. I think that, I don't know if I mentioned it in the book or not, but I think in the foreword or the acknowledgments, I mentioned how there's literally a song or an album that you could listen to every day from Depeche Mode to fit any mood that you have. If you're in an angry mood, you can listen to this. If you're in a melancholy mood, you can listen to this. If you want to get yourself excited and you're getting ready to go out for the night, you can listen to this. It's all over the place. They're sonically as a band, and I think that that's one of the things that makes them so great. They never ever repeated themselves.
This is very true, Michael, because I've often said this, that Martin Gore said that since they released Black Celebration, he said everything had a thread running through it. And that was kind of like where Martin went, okay, now I've really found myself. And that sort of followed through for the next few albums. But even with that, the albums always changed. And what's funny is a lot of artists, if you look at their early days, they would stumble and fumble. They'll release 3 or 4 albums, and then they will find themselves. And then once they really find themselves, every album after that is kind of similar. Depeche Mode didn't do that, and I found that very dangerous. And this is thanks to, I always give a lot of credit to Daniel Miller for giving them that flexibility, because you can imagine when Some Great Reward came out, it was very successful. And then, it had, none of Depeche Mode's music is dance music, but it had kind of there were certain upbeat kind of songs to it. And then they come out with Black Celebration, which is very much a concept album. Now, if Depeche Mode was signed to a regular label, they would never be allowed to release Black Celebration because it was just too sort of concepty. Where am I going with this? By the time they get to Violator, which, I even cite as sonic perfection, excuse me, I'm a fanboy. I think it was even Gary Newman who said he got depressed when he heard Violator because, forgive me if it wasn't him who said it, I believe it was him who said he got depressed when he heard Violator because he thought, how the hell can I get to that level? I think a lot of artists felt that way. But think of it, a lot of artists, if they released Violator, and which was cited as one of their best albums, they would just repeat that. And it's even like our friend Gary Newman, love him, but his last 5 albums have been very focused in one direction. Depeche Mode, this is what I love about them. They do Violator, and by all means, you could say, we have found our sound. This is groundbreaking. And then they go 360 and they release Songs of Faith and Devotion, which is completely different, which is very dangerous, because when you get that success to change direction that dramatically. But it's, as you say, every album, every approach was different. And this is why you're listening to the same band, but you're not listening to the same band at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's a testament to how much of an artist Depeche Mode is, that they don't want to say, well, we had success with that. I mean, they didn't have success with Violator. They broke the doors down in the States with Violator. And any record executive would say, okay, guys, you found the formula. Now you've broken through in the States. So many bands from Europe, they can never break through in the States. You've done it. Let's keep that going.
Yeah. Next
album, we want Personal Jesus Part 2.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. And they stuck to their artistic wants and needs, especially given all the personal issues they were going through as those years went on, as the 90s wore on. But the fact that each record, you don't know what you're going to get until you open it up and pop your headphones on and listen to it. That to me is one of the most exciting things about the band. And if you know that they're staying true to themselves, that's going to make you as a fan respect them more.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the only time I sort of heard them, this is just my opinion, where they really sort of, where it just sounded quite blatantly where they were actually copying a formula, was if you take Enjoy the Silence, which is arguably probably one of their most successful songs, because it kind of crossed over into the commercial boundary, crossed over into the commercial field. If you listen to Precious from Playing the Angel, if you listen to Playing the Angel, just the tempo, the way it starts, the break, it is so based, I don't want to say it's a riff, but it is based on the formula of Enjoy the Silence. However, that is the only, and I'm a fanboy, that is the only example I can mention. If you take any other top band like U2 or Oasis, I can cite dozens of songs where they're copying, formula from other songs. But the Depeche Mode, I can only think, okay, off the top of my head, I'm thinking, you think of Precious and Fragile Things. It starts with that do 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 do
Mhm.
do do do. It's the same as in Draw the Silence. Dun 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 diddle dun dun. It's got the same kind of. There is a structure similarity, but those are the only two songs in the catalog I can think of where they kind of copied.
But do you still love Precious?
I'm not a huge fan of Precious. I've rated Playing the Angel as the sort of best album they've released in the century. I think it's my favorite one.
Yeah.
I liked Precious when I heard it, but it's not, when I see people at concerts crying when they hear it, it doesn't do that for me.
Yeah. I understand though exactly what you're saying, where it's sort of that callback.
Yeah.
And that's why when I first heard that, I said, oh, well, this is nice, because they've never done that before.
Yeah.
They've never called back to a previous sound or a previous song. I'm like, that's interesting. And then my second thought was, I hope they don't do that on the rest of the record, because that would be just such a colossal step backward for a band that's put out at that point however many albums, that they're going to now step back and they're going to say, okay, well, the last one didn't sell as well as we wanted. Let's go back to that Violator formula. It's like, no, please don't. And thankfully they didn't on Playing the Angel, and it's such an incredible record. But for me, and especially given everything they've done since, that they haven't gone back, it's just a nice little, oh yeah, we recognize our past, and here's a little nod to it, a little tip of the hat, and we're going to keep moving forward though, just so you know.
I think you've absolutely explained, you've hit the nail on the head there. I like the way you use the word a callback. And that was really, to me, when I heard that, it was kind of like, yeah, that was like an acknowledgement to, okay, that was our biggest hit. Here's like a callback. I like that. That's a great, I'm going to use that as a saying on my channel. I'll have to give you credit for that.
Yes.
So as we talk about Goreisms, everything. Martin Gore has this thing that he does in songs, and I always call it a Goreism. So we'll call this a Michaelism, Mikeism. Yeah. What was I going to say to you now? So let's just have a look at you. What is your day-to-day schedule like? How do you roll? Yeah,
well, I'll tell you, things as everywhere else, it's gotten crazy with the pandemic, and it's, for me, it's been work-wise, not much has changed, because each day it's get up and go start writing. If not having a good inspiration day, or I'm not really on a hard deadline and I need to kind of shake the cobwebs out, it's like, okay, let's go for a run, or let's go to the gym. Let's just kind of get the blood pumping and let's get things going. And then it's right back to the computer and get writing some more. There's really nothing more I enjoy than sitting down and writing about, and I'm lucky enough these days that I can write about bands that I love. And whether it's a band with a new album coming out, or I do some anniversary pieces for different magazines, it's so gratifying to be able to just sit and enjoy that. So yeah, for me, day to day is getting up and getting right on and starting writing and seeing what that project is for the day, and where we're going to go, what road we're going to go down with it.
Yeah, I think no matter what the vocation is that you want to get into, there's always a lot of doing what you don't like. And I think there's, and I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I can understand with being, a writer or a journalist, there is a lot of covering subjects that you don't like, for the sake of who you're working for.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that in the beginning of my career. And, you go to interview, nothing against her, but like an Avril Lavigne, it's like, all right, well, tell me how you wrote Skater Boy, it's but, thankfully those days are behind me. But of course you get tedium with even if it's something that you love doing completely. If you're a professional surfer, you still got to get the sand out of your trunks at the end of the day. And that's not the fun part.
I'm gonna actually ask you to give some words of wisdom and advice for any sort of up and coming writers that want to do what you're doing. But I think, because I coach people, and one of the things, I'm going to ask you to give your own advice in a moment. But one of the things I always say, and you can probably agree with this, Michael, is it's just showing up. Because I have no doubt, because a lot of people have this idea, they think if you're doing what you love, you just love it all the time. And I want to just say that's not true. There are moments that it does suck, but you have to just show up. And I think in your case, you have to sit down at your desk and write. Even if you're not feeling it, you have to write. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's days when I get up and I'm just sitting there and going, I'm just not feeling it today. I've got no inspiration. And even though I have something that I have on the docket, I just have no inspiration to write about it. I'm just trying to pull, and thankfully there's always something else that I can do. With the book, one of the most tedious things was chasing down photographs, which I didn't talk too much about when Brian was here, because Brian was one of the he was the bright light in a sea of darkness when it was coming to dealing with a lot of photographers. Whether it was mainly about money, and of course everybody wants to get paid, and you're going to get paid, but you say, okay, I want this picture from when Depeche Mode played Coachella. How much will you sell it to me for? And they say, I'll let that one go for $6,000. And it's like, what? That's, my budget doesn't even come close to covering that for a single photo. It's not there. And you deal with a lot of people that are that you're not catching a break. And but it's those tedious things that you can push yourself through. And then once you have that inspiration, then you get back into the writing and say, okay, now I'm having a good one. You know, I've had my cup of tea and let's get it going.
Cup of tea. That's very English.
Yeah. That's just something I've picked up from all my friends in the UK. And it's like the little O in the name. It's something I've picked up from being overseas.
When last were you in the UK?
It's been, I think 2019.
Okay.
I was there last. Yeah. And then obviously we haven't been able to do any traveling now, which is, it stinks. You know, you can't go anywhere, but as soon as all this lifts and we get back to some semblance of being able to travel, I'll be back over there.
Well, you'll be sure to hit us here, and Brian and I'll take you for a beer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just sort of coming back to what one thing has just popped into my head now. You're talking about. I'm very fascinated by this. I can't think of many people. I think I did have someone once in my group who said, "Excite is their favorite album." And I jumped up and I said, "You're just trying to be controversial, aren't you?" So I think it's very interesting. But what made a lot of sense was one of the recent interviews I did. Well, I don't like the word interview. One of the recent chats I had with Gareth, he explained very well why why some people probably don't like Exciter that much, and he explained it very well. And it's kind of like he said, "Look, Vaughn," he said, "Oh," and then he goes, "Look, guys," he always grabs his head like that. And he says, "It's just." Most bands don't ever get to that level. So imagine getting to the level of Violator, and then you up the ante, and then you get to Songs of Faith and Devotion. The only way was down after that, because they'd raised the bar so high. And then we go to Ultra, which was the album that almost never got made, because it almost became Martin Gore's solo album. But I've got so much. I always liked that album, but it's rated really highly in my opinion. I really, really like it. But Gareth was called in during those, because, Alan had left and they had worked in a certain way. So they had to get other musicians in and whatnot. And of course, Gareth was one of those that was called in as well, because he's part of the team. And look, and I think Gareth was, did he engineer the recording of Home? And he has a bit of fanboy geekiness for trivia for you. The song Home, which is one of Martin's best songs. It was recorded with Martin just standing, holding just a mic. It wasn't even anything special. You'd sort of think he'd probably go into a vocal booth, and you'd think of the best microphone. And Gareth said, no. He just picked up a mic, and literally he didn't have headphones on. He was literally just standing, holding the mic, and the audio was coming out of the speakers. And he just sang it in, was it one or two goes, and bang. And people were like, fucking hell, that's the take, Martin.
Yeah.
And then me being a producer and a geek, I went to Gareth and I went, Gareth, did he not record with headphones? He went, no, Vaughn, he didn't. I said, well, Gareth, that means if you listen to the vocal take in isolation, there's going to be spill. There's going to be echo. Like you're obviously going to get the. And Gareth went, yeah, and I'm and this is something I'm changing subject here again. I did a video on my Geek Talk series once where I said the something, what did I say? The gurus don't care, and nor should you. And the point I was trying to make was, when I meet these people like the Gareth Joneses and the Dave Bascombs and stuff, they're so kind of like, yeah, they just do it.
Yeah.
They're not worried about the things like, you know, the novices, like, oh, well, you know, what's that doing? What's that doing? And, you know, I'm going off topic here, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
And it makes sometimes the mistakes are what makes a song, or just doing it differently. Like if you're getting that sound bleed, yeah, but it's what makes the song so raw and so great. And you look back, maybe you think, why does that song affect me so much? Why is Home affecting? Well, maybe because it was so spontaneous, or in the way they recorded it wasn't, okay, take a break, we're going to get the level set, we're going to get you your headphones, and but to be able to do it like that, maybe that's why it comes across so genuine. I
think it's something, I don't know the exact story, and I tell you what, I'm going we'll do this. We'll corner Gareth into talking to you somehow. I'll do one of our video chats that I do, and you'll just pop up, and I'll go, pop up. And then you can give him a whole stuff. But he did say, I don't know what the whole story was behind Home, and we can probably talk about that. But it was something more like, okay, Martin, just, you know, you just want to show us or feel, and he just like went for it. And they went, that's it. That's the take kind of thing. And you hear a lot about that. And this is the very often one final thing on music production. I often find that is why demos, often you go in and you make a demo, and then when you go back to do the final product, there is something in the demo that you can never recapture, because that moment was a moment. You know what I mean?
I agree. And that was one of my favorite parts about Sounds of the Universe, when they put out that deluxe set that came with all those demos, which I think about that now, and this is just a different aside, but I really wish they hadn't done that with Sounds of the Universe. I wish they'd released it on its own, do a demo thing, because I think that tends to overshadow that record a bit. And which I love that album. I think that there's so many good songs on there that don't get enough play. Songs like Fragile Tension, which I think was only played a couple of times live. Come Back. I mean, there's so many great songs on there, but I loved getting that deluxe set where it had all those demos. You had demos of Clean, and it's like, wow, they really dug back for this stuff. And yeah, I think that there's something to be said about those demos and hearing the passion of them come through.
Michael, there is so much we can talk about, and I'm hoping, I'm very proud. I'm not saying this in a smug way. I'm saying this in a very proud way. And that is, everyone that I have chatted with before, there's kind of a door that's opened, and they're happy to come back and talk to me again. Is that going to be the case with you as well?
I hope so. I've had a blast doing this, and I would love to come back and chat with you again.
Okay, so here's a question. Have you been, obviously you're a member of Depeche Mode Global Facebook group. Has Rob got you on a drinking chat yet?
I have not been on a drinking chat. I do know about them, but I have not been on one.
Okay, well, and now here's me busting Rob Rom's balls. Rob Rom, come on. Why have you not got, I've been on there as a special guest. Why have you never got Michael Christopher on for a drinking chat?
I think he's waiting to see if he likes the book or not. I've got a book on the way to him right now, and he might say, keep this guy off of our drinking chats.
Right. One thing, Michael, I've obviously we've just met, but you know, from what I can say, and guys, he hasn't given me a tenner to say this, but you're one of those easy to talk to kind of guys. And as I'm bringing this interview to an end now, or this conversation, I feel we could go on all night, but let's obviously I've got to keep this to a certain length, but I'm glad to know that you'll be happy to come on again and talk to us.
Absolutely. This was a great time, and I wish you all the best with your channel in the future. I love it. It's been one of my favorite ones to check out, and I love when you have new episodes up. It's great.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad this. I wish this actually came out a couple of years ago when I started it, because there's some fascinating things here, some interesting things, and I will be using this as a reference and a sort of go-to thing, because I was actually just, as I say, flipping through, and I was reading through some of the Violator things, because I'm just about to start my Violator album review series. And as I say, I'd love to get you on again on a future episode, just to talk about things further. Right, guys, so you're watching this. It is, if you can see it, it is Depeche Mode FAQ. All that's left to know about the world's finest synth-pop band by Michael Christopher. If you're a fan, you want to check it out. You're probably saying, Vaughn, you haven't even read it yet, but what's great about this is it's something you can read from cover to cover. And you can also, what's nice about this is it's something you can take with you, and you can just, you know, if you're having a coffee and just go flip, oh, Delta Machine, and you can read. And it's just a really easy read. It's really engaging. And I'm looking forward to a time where I can really just have some time and enjoy this, but I'm really going to savor this. And I'm really grateful for you. I'm sure a lot of people are grateful, because I have not seen anything like this. I've read some of their other document. It was Steve Mallon's did one. There's quite a few.
Oh yeah.
But this is just something that is, it's not intimidating. You can just pick it up and go, oh, I can just read one thing at a time. So that's it. Anyway,
I'm glad you picked up the book, and I'm glad you like it, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts as you dig deeper into the book.
Thanks. Guys, to you watching, links in the description below. Check out everything to do with Michael Christopher, and he will be back on this channel again at some point. Michael, with that, my friend, I wish you all the best. Be safe, and I look forward to seeing you again, my friend.
Thank you. Cheers.
All the best, brother.